Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. It is October 1. I can't believe it. I don't know if you can. I founded the Sales Pro Network because I'm a sales coach and trainer, and I work with both individuals and organizations to help them increase their sales. And I founded this group as a place where you can increase your personal sales. You can get coaching from not just me, but my competitors. I have a lot of them on this group. You can come and ask questions. You can share your successes, your challenges, and as I hope you know by now, every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, we do either a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales, or I do a live training. And once again, today is no exception. But before I introduce our guest, I just want to give a quick tip. Today is October 1st, which means it's Q4. You've made it through the first 3 quarters of the year, and here we are. Now, I mean, right now is the time to make a strong push to close out your year big, because in about 30 days, you're going to start hearing this. Call me after the holidays. Some of us fall for that. I have definite advice on what to say if you get that one, and please reach out to me if you do. But you want to start making a big push now. When I say big push, I don't mean be pushy. I never teach people or coach people to be pushy salespeople, but really get your rear end in gear and do everything you need to both close business. By the way, a great idea would be contact everybody who for the first 3 quarters told you, I need to think it over. They just might be ready to buy, and they just might need a conversation with you to help them choose to do that. And the other thing you want to make certain that you do is continue or start to prospect both consistently and effectively, because most of us are not in a highly transactional sale, which high today and close tomorrow. So if you're prospecting now, you're starting to set up your Q1 for 2022. All that stuff's very important. If you're watching us live, please put your name and say hello into the comments. If you have not connected your Facebook account to StreamYard, please put your name in there. Otherwise, all we see is Facebook user. And if you're watching on replay, put replay in the comments. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to my new friend, and I know you're going to love her like I do. Say good morning to Lynn Catalano. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for having me on today.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for being so patient with that very long introduction. So, Lynn, before we get started on my million questions that I have for you, would you just please tell everybody what it is that you do and really what brought you to here?
Well, Jeff, it's interesting. You know, I'm an attorney by education, and I've spent more than the last 20 years as a professional fundraiser, which for those of you who are saying, why are you on sales? Well, fundraising is sales. So I hope that your listeners realize that. But also what I realized in the last 2 years or so was that I loved building relationships, and I loved, more than that, speaking to people and getting to meet people and talking to them about the importance of both reading the room and identifying toxic relationships in the workplace. I help people both individually as far as learning how to navigate difficult people in the workplace and learning how to cope and thrive. And I help organizations learn how to improve their culture and work with people and invest in their employees.
And I'm guessing you did not learn that in law school. How did you get to be this good at what you do?
No, that's where the 20 years of experience really come into play. I have had the pleasure of working for really terrific bosses and really toxic individuals. And I have learned an awful lot of life lessons from those experiences. And I'd love to help people prevent them from going down that rabbit hole that I went down.
Yeah, I co-authored a book called Leverage Your Laziness, and one of the chapters in there talks about what we call toxic vampires. I'm sure that as an expert, you have better advice, but mine is cut them out of your life. Just get rid of them, because they suck the energy out of you and they suck your soul. By the way, good morning to Fran Cole Hebler down in Texas. Yeehaw. And good morning, Steve Kent. Thank you for being here as always. So let's get to some questions. When you say read the room, what does that actually mean? And why is that so crucial for salespeople?
So for me, reading the room very, very, very basically is just being the opposite of oblivious. That is utilizing your high emotional intelligence. Reading the room has become such an important concept in Korea. They came up with a term for it. They call it nunchi. And nunchi is understanding who is speaking, who is listening, who is interrupting. And while you're making these observations, you're quickly assessing the pecking order of the room so that you can then take this information and figure out who's who and whom you should speak to build relationships faster and build trust and build rapport, which we know anyone in sales needs to do to close the deal.
Yeah, well, you beat me to it because I had one of my questions was, what is Nunchi and what's a Nunchi master? So thank you for that explanation. Yes, you're 1,000,000% right. Good morning, Facebook users. Sorry, whoever said morning, Jeff. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. If you could just post what your name is, because Facebook doesn't do that automatically when we're on StreamYard. Yeah, reading the room is crucial in sales, whether you're talking to one person or a group of people. If you don't understand the other person, and I always, or lately I've been saying this a lot, this is an overused word, except it's not really. If you don't have empathy, if you don't understand the other person, you're probably not going to close business, because it's not like it was 48 years ago when I started selling, high pressure, let's give a pitch, close today. That's not the way the world works anymore. So being able to read the room and understand not only who's in charge, but also how to relate to each person in the room seems like a crucial concept that salespeople better understand. If not, they're going to be screwed. Does reading the room also apply to other situations, or do you only apply it to sales? For example, what about like a toxic spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, or even a toxic child?
I think that by exercising the ability to read the room and practicing quick nunchi, that's going to help everybody in every aspect of their lives, personal or professional. So I was going to give you real quick 4 easy steps to practice quick nunchi, if you would be interested in that.
You keep beating me to it, because I was just about to say, do you have any top tips for being a nunchi master? Because that's something I absolutely want to do.
Well, so first of all, you should find a nunchi guide. Well, here I am, but since I can't be with you in all social situations, find someone that that you can see acclimates quickly in a situation and follow their cues. A lot of this is about nonverbal cues and about social cues that we see we're just not paying attention to. So we've got to pay more attention to all of these nonverbal cues. Step 2 is really important. Listen more than you speak. So the Greek philosopher Epictetus said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Now, reflective listening is super important in building relationships. I actually don't think you can build effective relationships without practicing reflective listening. But for salespeople, you have to learn to stop talking. I think that's really important. I know for me in fundraising, it was so important in building the relationship was listening to figure out where their passions laid. So that if I could figure out what they were passionate about, then I knew what to ask for support for. At the time I was raising money in healthcare, you have a bevy of different opportunities for anybody. And you can't go in asking for the ER if they're super passionate about, the NICU. So you have to figure that out. And the only way to do that is to ask good questions and listen. Step 3 is, I'm sure many of you remember Miss Manners. She was the utmost expert in etiquette in printed media for years. I have to say, though, if I say that to millennials, they look at me like I'm crazy. So
I also don't know what a rotary dial phone is, but that's okay.
But like Miss Manners, right? So it's really important. It's really important to follow the etiquette in the situation you're in at the time. So make sure to pay attention if everybody's taking off their shoes or if people are, fist bumping or whatever it is. Make sure that you follow the etiquette, and it makes everyone more comfortable when everyone's abiding by the same set of rules. And then 4 is probably the most important, is read between the lines. There's a lot of things that aren't said in a conversation, and you've really got to pay attention to the context. And this is more practicing empathy, just as you suggested, Jeff, and more reflective listening. I think that is all part of nunchi for sure.
That's great stuff. Can you define reflective listening as opposed to listening? I teach listening skills to salespeople when I coach them. It's a crucial concept, and most of us, and this is a technical sales training term that I'm going to share with you right now. Most of us suck at listening. We are horrendous. Salespeople are the worst listeners in the world for the most part because we think we get paid to speak. I get paid to speak, but not when I'm selling. When I'm selling, I get paid to ask questions and listen. So what's reflective listening?
So reflective listening employs two parts, two components. The first part is listening to understand the speaker. And the second part is the listener repeats back the concept to the speaker to make sure that it's understood correctly. I mean, that alone is huge because we have a very bad habit of listening to respond. Right?
Exactly right.
We're waiting for that pause so that we can put in our comments because what we have to say is the most important, which is not the case. We should be listening to understand and repeat that back so that the speaker knows that we're listening.
100%. You have a great future in sales training if you want to stop doing what you're doing, because what you just shared was what I call the third step of the sales process. I call it the confirmation step. And that's simply where you've asked all your questions, you've listened actively, and you now feed back, you paraphrase what you think you heard, which either, well, first of all, it shows them that you were listening. You're either going to get confirmation that what you think you heard is what you heard, or you're going to get corrected. They'll tell you, no, you were wrong. Like if I was trying to sell you sales training services, you were a VP of sales, and I said, so Lynn, if I heard you right, I think you told me you had 20 salespeople. You might say, yes, Jeff, that's exactly right, which means I've got good information to base my presentation on. Or you might say, no, Jeff, I said 25. I've still got the right information, but I've shown you I care enough to get that right information that I was at least doing my best to listen. I'm with you 1,000,000%. Somebody else has said, good morning, Jeff Goldberg and Linda Catalano. Again, I don't know your name because it just says Facebook user. So if you put your name in there, we can say hi properly. Something occurred to me a moment ago. Maybe this is just a personal thing. I don't know if it applies to anybody else. But as you were speaking about paying attention to all the little things, could that apply in dating also? Especially, I'm an old guy, but I'm single at this age, and I'm on the dating sites. And sometimes I read a profile, and I look at a picture, and I'm like, something just seems off here. I mean, is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, if you can think about, so we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence. I just want to make sure that we understand emotional intelligence is the ability to manage and regulate my emotions and understand that you have emotions as well. And so if we're doing that, I think that's already elevating our relationship. But certainly if you're out there in the dating world, yes, you have to be emotionally intelligent, but you also have to reflectively listen to this person, right? Because everybody's just going to spout whatever their, it sounds like a CV, I'm sure, when you start dating, right? Because you tell people, I like this, I like that, I do this, I've done that. And then they do the same. And then you have to decide if there's something there. And maybe it's something different. Maybe it should be revealing something about yourself that is, whatever you think is a little bit off. Maybe it's, you love Ted Lasso, which I happen to love. So, I mean,
that's terrific. I think a new episode tonight, right?
Oh, so excited.
Yeah,
so excited.
Fantastic.
It's coming to the end of the season and I don't want it to end.
Yeah,
but it's the kind of thing where maybe you can relate on a different level. Maybe it's not about just, what you've done and where you've been. And maybe it's about, look, we both had a lot of experiences, but what do you like? Like, what's your favorite meal? Like, what's your favorite? I find that revealing something about yourself and using vulnerability as your superpower helps people relate to you.
Got it. Okay, so it turns out that was Valerie Heffron, who says, great info. I always look for the connectors and the wallflowers. Those are my two favorite people in the room. Good morning, Valerie. It's great to have you here. Could you just, you keep beating me to my questions. I think I'm just going to throw them all out. No, that's great. That's perfect. Could you just speak a little bit more about EI? Because emotional intelligence is a term that gets thrown around all the time, and I don't think people have a solid understanding. I'm not sure that I do either. So could you really define it for us and explain to us, why is it so important?
Yes, absolutely. So, it only came about in like 1990. And it was two researchers started talking about it. And then this author, Dan Goleman, wrote a whole book about it in 96 called Emotional Intelligence. And that's really where it took off. So the exact definition is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. So if you really dig into that, I have spent a lot of time analyzing a whole opposite group, and that is the narcissist and people who have narcissistic personality disorder, and they literally do not possess emotional intelligence. So once you realize that, it's super easy to recognize because they just don't care that you have emotions at all. So when you're in a conversation with someone like that, it's difficult for them to even ask an open-ended question. So that becomes a real red flag. And emotional intelligence tells us that I'm not the only person on the planet, like that there are people that everyone is going through this. And, we talk about how frustrating it is when you are waiting for something and it doesn't arrive on time. And
yes, we are.
And then you realize it's okay. It's okay. I'm a little upset because I counted on it at a certain time. But it's okay, because in the big picture, it's not going to make that big a difference if I get it last night or today. As long as I get it, it's going to be fine. So I think that that's exercising your emotional intelligence for sure.
So you're saying I was doing well last night?
No, you're doing better today.
All right, so let me share this with everybody now so that you understand, so that you're not left out. So before we went live, I told Lynn, I was expecting a package yesterday that I had to sign for. It didn't show up. It may show up. I really, really want it. If the doorbell rings, I'm going to say, I'll be right back, and you're going to vamp. And what happened last night, it's my new iPhone. It updated to iOS 15. It kind of screwed up my old iPhone, and I really want my new one. And I told Lynn that when I found out last night it wasn't going to arrive, I was like, I want to kill somebody. And then it took me about 3 minutes. And I went, it's not really the end of the world. It's just a phone. I'll get it in the next day or two. But it's that automatic, like robotic, press button. I don't get what I want, better be pissed off. And then the ability to get that back under control. And am I correct? This is something that human beings aren't really born with. We have to develop it, because if you take a look at like a 5 or a 6-year-old, they have very little emotional intelligence. And in most of us, it tends to develop, but in some of us, it just doesn't. Yes?
Correct. I think that it's definitely a learned behavior. However, I think that, for better or worse, parents who show empathy and have the ability to possess empathy show that and teach that to their children, right? I learned empathy because my mother was a highly empathetic person who liked to expose me to a lot of different types of people in a lot of different settings, cultures, etc. And, I think that she was the type of person who had no fear going into those situations. And that is what I have because of her. It's certainly not something you're born with. Narcissists have no ability to express empathy. So if we know that, you can't learn that kind of behavior from them. So that's empathy is definitely part of emotional intelligence for sure. When I talk about EI, I talk about, I was at a foundation that I had built from the ground up for 16 years. And I was very proud of it. Certainly they had zero functionality when I got there. They were only incorporated on paper. And I took them to a place 16 years later where they had literally, I wrote the policies and procedures. They had events and annual benchmarks. They had fundraising every year. They had $5 million in endowments. It was to a great place. Now, I've since worked for leaders who felt that the organization would not continue if they left. That's how important they felt they were to the organization. I knew when I left that organization that I left it better than when I found it. And I knew it would continue after I left. That was the hope. That was the whole plan, right? That I was not integral to the success of the organization. I had done the best I could. I gave it 100%, but I knew that the next person coming in would keep it going. And that was, to me, that was emotional intelligence.
So I know, good morning, Don Levine, our executive recruiter from Long Island, and good morning, Ben Gibbs, one of my favorite salespeople. I've worked with lots and lots of companies all over the world, big and small, companies that as well as tiny companies we've never heard of. And, I've met a lot of what I would certainly consider a toxic leader. You got the person at the top who's just out of control, no EI whatsoever, do it my way, mercurial temperament. How do you deal with that? One of the things that my coach has taught me is because I spent a lot of time trying to fix other people, and she taught me that you can only fix the person in the mirror. So how does somebody who's working for a toxic boss survive? Is it my advice, which is just get out of there, or is there a way to actually make it work?
So I completely agree with your advice. When I speak to a group and we first talk about how to identify these toxic individuals. And then once you've identified them, what do you do? And I always give the caveat, if you can leave, if you can find another place to work, if you can seek out another position, please do so now, because it's the best thing for you, for your mental health. However, many people can't leave for one reason or another, whether it's the commute or the work from home, or it's the flexibility, or it's the benefits or the childcare, whatever it is, they need to stay in that job at least for X number of years. Now, if you have to do that, how do you stay when you're so miserable? I think I have a whole variety of things you can do. One of those very important things is to make yourself a trusted, valued member of the organization. So above all, do your job and do it well. Do it exceptionally well. Give it 100%. Don't give it less just because you're miserable. Continue to do your job. So if you make yourself a trusted member of the organization, perhaps, I don't know, but perhaps things will get a little better because people know that they can count on you to complete your task when assigned. And perhaps that makes it a little more tolerable. Another important advice that I give people is to minimize your interactions with that person. So whether it's your supervisor, your CEO, whomever it is that you find is this toxic person, try your best, and I'm never telling you to be insubordinate, but if there's an opportunity to take a meeting on the telephone, if there's an opportunity to say that you're going to work from home today, if those are acceptable options, then take them, because it will make things a little bit more tolerable for you.
Okay. And is there a value in, I want to ask this question right. I almost said confronting it, but that's obviously not the thing to do. Is there a value in having a conversation with a toxic boss and saying, hey, look, I really like working here. I really want to stay, but I'm having some challenges, and can we work it out? I mean, as I'm asking the question in my head, it seems impossible, because when you've got somebody who's that narcissistic personality, they never think they're wrong. It's always the other person. And, obviously the confront word, which I was about to say, absolutely won't work. So are there some methodologies that you share with people that can enable you to have a conversation that might result in an improvement?
So I guess, it really depends on the boss. It depends on the person, because to generalize those types of toxic individuals and those types of toxic leaders, they don't like to be challenged. They don't want to be criticized, and they don't want you to ask them to explain their actions, because it never ends well. They will not be backed into a corner. So, again, these are people with very low emotional intelligence. So they're not really understanding or perceiving that their behavior is affecting you, because you're irrelevant in their world. So that makes it near impossible to have that kind of conversation. I can tell you part of their issues are that they don't communicate well. Like they don't express their opinions. They don't express their emotions. They give edicts, and they tell you what to do. They don't want any discussion about it. Just do it, right? They avoid conflict. They don't want to have these discussions. They are the supreme ruler. Don't question them. So I think that makes it almost impossible to have that kind of conversation. I mean, I'm the kind of person who I like to talk about something, and I want to know, if you didn't realize that already, I certainly like to talk a lot. My husband famously will say to me, "The horse is dead. Please stop beating it," But I want to know, like, where did this come from? Why did you say this? Like, why? What's happening here? And so, of course, that has translated into my career, and I've certainly worked for some people that said, "I'm just not going to talk about this anymore. We're done." So you have to figure that out, and that makes the situation even worse. What you need to realize is that toxic bosses and toxic leaders come from a place of very, very low self-confidence, low self-esteem, and deep-rooted insecurity. And so that's what all comes out in the negatives. Do you remember when your mother told you that the bully on the schoolyard really liked you and just wanted to be friends with you, and you thought, no, that's not what they want? But in reality, these people are deeply, deeply insecure, and they're trapped. They can't communicate.
And in my experience, it's not always a person. Sometimes it's departments. I've walked into organizations where I can think of one particular example, the inside team. There were a bunch of women who worked inside the office. They would take phone calls. They would communicate with the salespeople. The salespeople would place orders for them, all kinds of stuff. And when I started to work with them, and I worked with the inside people, the outside salespeople suck. They don't know their jobs. They're horrible. When I talk to the outside people, the inside people suck. They're horrible. I can't get along with them. This is broken. We're never going to fix it. I did something, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, although it did produce a good result, so maybe it was. I do what I call a clearing meeting. And there are a bunch of rules for a clearing meeting, which I hand out in advance. Like, there are no accusations. It's just sharing your feelings. When this happens, here's how it affects me, and here's how I feel, rather than you're an idiot. Any value in is that the type of thing we're talking about here? Letting people express themselves without fear, without beating them up. And I found that sometimes that'll actually help the situation.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I think that's really, really unbelievably high level, Jeff. Because I think it's about it's like having a real I hope this isn't offensive to anybody, but I know in sales it's not, a real come to Jesus meeting where you're sitting down and we've just got to lay everything on the table, because we're having a big problem in the organization. That's the type of organization I would love to get into and help them, because they don't realize what they're doing. They're manifesting all of these negative behaviors, and what the message that they're sending the outside customer is so negative and so bad. Just to give you an example, I spoke to, I had to call my insurance agent and just to get a new car ID card, right? They had sent me the one, and they sent it only in my name, and it's always been in my husband and my name, for both vehicles. I thought it was so odd, but regardless, I just called and said, I needed a new one. First, I called and I left a message, because sometimes for me, 7 o'clock in the morning, I remember something. I know the office isn't open, but I'm going to leave a voicemail and then move on, right?
Yep.
Nobody called me back. It's like 11 o'clock. I said, where is this? So I called them, and the person that answered the phone had like all kinds of reasons. Instead of saying, I'm so sorry, that's terrible, I want to help you, how can I help you? Which is what you want someone in customer service to say to you. She said, the phone system is terrible. The person that was supposed to do it didn't do it. Like, it was like blame, 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 blame. And as a customer, what am I supposed to do with that information? Like, all I want is my card, and I just want it in a nice, like, can't we just be respectful and move on? Like, so I would love to get into that organization to show them how much the power of positivity, what that could do for them, certainly.
Yeah, and I find quite often salespeople get stuck in, here's how it is, so that's how it's got to be, instead of doing what you call reflective listening. I'm involved in a situation right now, and as you're speaking, I'm replaying it in my head and going, well, maybe I didn't handle that as well as I could, because I was too busy trying to be right. But I took on a new client. In fact, today's the first day of the engagement. When we get done with this interview, I'm getting in my car and driving over there to hold my first sales meeting with them. And one of the things that I'm going to do for them is bring in a new CRM system, a customer relationship management system. And the owner of the company reached out to the company I recommended to arrange a demo, copied me on it. And the salesperson replied like 2 or 3 days later, which I was appalled at. So I'm already pissed off that it took that long. And she wasn't very forthcoming. We finally got to the point where we said, look, we just want a demo. And she wrote back saying, okay, I'll need to have a preliminary conversation to get the requirements. And I wrote back saying, we just want a demo. And then she wrote back saying, well, that's not the way it works here. And I could give you a generic demo, but I want to tailor it to you, and blah, 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 blah. And I finally wrote back last night and said, look, I'm not just a sales manager. I'm also a sales trainer and coach. And may I advise you that you're not making it easy for me to do business with you. I want to get on a phone call with you and show me a demo. I want to buy your product. Sometimes we're so stuck in, here's how it's got to be, as opposed to listening to the prospect. Makes me crazy. Valerie Heffern has a question for you. She says, how do you recommend dealing with passive aggressive behavior? Valerie is very passionate about animals, and so am I. I encourage yet this style often with elected officials.
Well, Valerie, first of all, I have a house full of rescues. I want you to know.
You're Valerie's best friend now.
I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. And it's often a very fun menagerie. And when I travel through my house, at least 4 of them are trailing me. The oldest dog is 13, so he does not follow me anymore. Anyway, here's the interesting thing. Just as a side note, a little bit of trivia for you. Passive aggressive behavior usually goes along with covert narcissists. They're not the narcissists that you think, that you see, don't you know who I am, which are that's what we think of when we hear the term narcissist. We think of that grandiose, I'm a very important person kind of person. Covert narcissists are different. They're the ones who are positioning themselves in a place where they're going to get lots of recognition. So they're like busy making a donation to something, but making sure they get their picture in the paper, or otherwise, or they're making sure to save the day, however that is, so that everybody clap for so-and-so, that's their reward. So these are covert narcissists that love passive aggressive behavior. So what do? I mean, it's the same solutions. Passive aggressive behavior, I think, makes me angrier than overt narcissistic behavior, because it it's as if there's a half of the population that's not even noticing these people that are doing these things to you, and they're equally as detrimental. I know that the best thing to do is to take a step back and just know, again, they're coming from a horrible place of deep-rooted insecurity. And I know that doesn't answer the question exactly, but you need to realize that they have a lot of things going wrong. And so you need to try and communicate with them the best way that you can. So knowing they don't communicate well and knowing that they're going to try and do this go around to you, you need to figure out the best way to communicate with them and embrace it. So stop challenging them. Stop trying to go your own route. Go the path of least resistance with these types of people. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Werner Erhard said something, well, he said many brilliant things many times. I followed him for years. And one of the things he said that I loved was, it's easier to ride the horse in the direction it's going.
Very true.
Salespeople, we've been talking about, people who work for a toxic boss, but salespeople sometimes sell someone, and it's a toxic relationship too. It's not a great client. Now, my advice once again is get rid of them. I'm a big fan of firing clients, not doing it capriciously, of course, but sometimes the best thing, in my opinion, you can do is say, I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore. I say that not only, saves you mentally, but it also frees up, I say nature abhors a vacuum. It gives you a spot for somebody better to come along.
Yeah. I've heard so many people say, that they spend this amount of time on a client that's giving them this much business. And when they look at that and they realize, they have these huge clients that take up very little amounts of their time. And I'm sure you do that kind of analysis. And that's what sets you free.
Yeah. Here's another note from, I believe, from Valerie saying, and by the way, I love Lynn. Don't we all? Lynn, once you've read the room, does it stay static, or do you constantly have to be watching for changes?
Oh, I think you constantly have to be aware. I mean, that's what you have to read between the lines. You have to know, listen, I believe that when I speak to an audience, I know that they have other things going on. I know that they have better places to be and better people to speak to. So I try and be concise. I have watched people who don't know how to read the room, and I'm sure you have as well, Jeff, either speak or lead a meeting, and you just want to get up and strangle them because they're not paying attention to what's going on. Like, they can't take the temperature of the room, right?
Yeah.
I got to tell you a really funny story that really goes to sales, because it was a sales meeting, right? So at the time I was working for a foundation, and I was selling people legacies. I was selling people the idea of planning their legacy, whether it be through scholarships, endowments, any kind of scheduled type donations, right? So that was my job. I was supposed to get signed agreements and funding sources and the whole thing. And these were big endowments. So I was at an organization that went through a very tumultuous period of time. And the executive director, who had been there for more than 40 years, was removed. And they hired a board member to be the executive director. And this was kind of a challenging time, to say the least. I'm trying to be as positive about this experience as I can, but I certainly learned a lot. So this one day, this person, by the way, he had no not-for-profit experience. He had no fundraising experience. So this one day I had a meeting scheduled with a prospect, and he said, I'm going to come along. Okay, fine. So we sit down with this donor, and this particular woman was a recent widow. I knew that this day was going to demand more reflective listening on my part, more patience, because she had always made these big financial decisions with her husband. And so this was going to be a little bit more challenging today. So I sit down, we do our greetings. Before we've even finished our greetings, he interrupts and he says, "Oh, Lynn, good, you're going to take notes. When we're done with the meeting, please type up the notes and send them to both Rose and myself." And I said, "Okay." So what did he do in that exchange? Well, he belittled me. He set the tone for the meeting, and he let Rose, the prospect, know that he and I are not on the same team. I mean, right then and there, he set the boundaries, right? So then I ignore him and I just go into my questions, right? So I'm asking her these questions to try and extract where are her passions, what is she looking for, what does she want, right? What does she want the vehicle to do? What does she want the legacy to do after she has passed on? So we're talking about that. She identifies, that she loves this one organization because her husband was so much a part of it. And she really wants to have enough income annually from the fund to make an impact at that organization. And while she wants her 3 children to be aware of what's happening, they each live out of town. They each have careers and families, so they can't be real hands-on. Okay, so I'm putting this all together. So my colleague, Dick, he says, "Oh, I think that you should think about this proposal." And he launches into like the one cookie cutter proposal that he has proposed to various clients in the last week. And it's like for a variety of organizations, and it'll benefit, there'll be a grant process, and her children can be on the grant committee and they can receive all the applications, and then they can determine each year which organizations receive the funds. And I'm just staring at him blankly, like he literally didn't listen to a word she just said. If you had been listening, you heard, I'm sure you heard what I just said. So I look blankly at Dick, I look at Rose, and I said, "How about if we do one fund to benefit the organization that you talked about, and we make it a large enough fund so that there's enough income annually to make an impact at that organization, and we make sure to notify your one selected child of what's going on, and that if they ever want to get further involved, they can, but right now we'll just inform them of what's happening annually. And how would that be?" And she sighed audibly because she was so relieved that there was another choice besides Dick's proposal. So then she leaves. We agree to follow up the next week. And he looks at me and he says, "Well, I think that went well, don't you?" Dick had no nunchie. So
it sounds like Dick was aptly named.
yes, correct.
It's funny, as you were speaking before, I started thinking, oh, gee, I must have some narcissist in me, because when you said, when you're in front of an audience, you're thinking they have better places to be. That thought never occurs to me. Whether I'm doing stand-up comedy or doing sales training, there's never a thought like that. It's always, God, these guys are so lucky that I'm here chatting with them today.
No, I think that's great self-confidence. I don't think that's narcissism.
Self-confidence I have in abundance, that's for certain. One of the things that you suggest, and I loved reading this, was all everyone is searching for is dignity. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
I believe that we would solve so many of these toxic work environments if leaders were aware and were empowering to all the employees to give them dignity. I worked for a CEO, and I reported directly to him, and he could not care less about employees. He felt that they were completely replaceable. He did not invest in his employees. He had almost 25% turnover annually. So in any organization, if you have 25% turnover, there is a problem in that organization. And he said to me, "I am not in the business of begging people to stay." Now, That's got to tell you an awful lot about him. Um, I believe that people want dignity and respect, and whether they are the maintenance staff in a hospital, or they are nurses or doctors, or they are the customer service person at the window that you check out of the doctor's office with, all they want is to be treated with respect. If you treat people with respect, you will get it back tenfold. And I don't understand why people don't get it. Like, what? It's not a difficult concept, right? Like, what? I'm the kind of person who, when I worked in a hospital, I'd come in, I said hello to everybody before I got to my desk. I like to say, I said hello to the coffee guy and the maintenance guy and the parking valet and the switchboard operator. And you know what? Those were my people, much more so than anybody in the C-suite. Like, these were the people that cared about me and that wanted me to succeed. Like, they had a vested interest. So, I think you just gotta, like, having nunchi and having emotional intelligence is about having respect for people. How could it not be, right? Just stand in an airport when they cancel a flight and watch people get in line and talk to the airline representative. Those people must have the thickest skin. Like, how? I mean, the things people say, unbelievable.
I become extra charming at that point, and I'm a
Me
pretty
too.
charming guy in the first place.
Me
But look, there is a time to put on your temper act when people are being unreasonable. But for the most part, flies with honey makes a lot of sense to me. And what you were saying about dignity and respect rings so true. Two thoughts came to mind. One is, there's a famous picture of President Obama either shaking a hand or just having a chat with one of the janitors in the White House.
Yes.
Now, presidents are busy people. They don't have a heck of a lot of time to stop and talk to a janitor. It just so speaks to the type of person we should be. The other thing that popped into my head was a book I read years and years ago. It was a famous book at the time called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic. I wasn't agreeing with 100% of it, but a good 85, 90% I thought was brilliant. And one of the things he talked about, men and women are different emotionally and psychologically, and that all men want. And when I read this, I was like, I almost started crying. I'm almost starting to cry now. We just want to know that you trust us. And I know in my own marriage, I never felt that. So there's some very basic things that we can do to make everything work better.
I think that is such a great point, because I think that's true across interpersonal and professional relationships, right? So you want to know that we trust you, and we just want to be respected, right?
You want to be heard
and seen.
Yeah. So when I read that, it was a real revelation, because it's a great book, guys. If you haven't read it, you should definitely read it. It talks about men want to come home and go into their cave and they don't want to talk to anybody, and women just want to talk. But what we men tend to want to do, and I'm telling you, I read this, I went, oh, is that me? We just want to fix things. So you want to tell us about the toxic relationship at work, and I'm going to say, well, here's how you fix it, but that's not what you're looking for. Right. You just want to be heard. So it's really also a part of EI to understand what the other person needs, because they may not be like us. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that when someone is a narcissist, and when they're a toxic leader, they often they completely micromanage everybody. And I think it's exhausting, right? Because I worked for the CEO, and like, he would ask me to do something, and then I would leave the room, and he'd text me, did I do it? And then he'd email me, did I do it? And then he'd email the person that I was supposed to talk to tell them that I was going to do it. I mean, ridiculous stuff. But why? Because they never trust anyone completely. They never empower people and delegate authority because they don't trust.
Yeah. And am I correct that when you would get a text like that from your boss, you would give him some verbal sign language to your phone?
Yes.
Yeah, I get it. So when I was doing my research on you, I came across something that I couldn't figure out. I probably should have Googled it, but among your hobbies is planning bananagrams. I'll bite. What's a bananagram? I'm thinking a telegram delivered by a banana. No, that can't be it. What's a bananagram?
So that's me trying to be funny. I don't know. I don't think it's working. I think it's flat. So,
It got me interested.
well, that's good. So Bananagrams is like a great word game, and it's a kid's game, but it's awesome. It's tiles, and it comes in a banana case. And for me, I mean, I have two daughters, and they are 20 and 16. And we still play this when we go on vacation. And like, there's, to me, nothing better than the fact that I am sitting somewhere with the two of them and my husband, and we're playing bananagrams, and like, no one's on their phone, no one's on Instagram, no one is checking anything. And we're there being present with each other and laughing and who's winning. And I will say I used to win a lot and I win less now. So, but it's super fun and I highly recommend it. It's probably $10 at Target. So I get nothing from bananagrams.
Yeah, that's one of the tough things about watching your kids grow up. You used to be able to beat them at every game. And as they grow up, it's like, how'd you do that? Whippersnapper.
Yeah.
The truth for me is I'm just so thrilled. I was a guy who never wanted to have kids. I'm never getting married. And if I'm ever stupid enough to get married, I will never have children. I marry a woman, fall in love, marry a woman. And she wanted to have kids. So I said, all right, what the heck, somebody to watch cartoons with. Just the greatest thing in the world. It's just so amazing to watch them grow up and become smart, well-adjusted, well, 2 out of 3 individuals. So what is it that you actually do for a company that wants to improve their culture and avoid toxic relationships in the first place?
So, first I'd take an assessment and figure out, I'd read the room, right? I would take the temperature of the company and come up with a plan and help them execute. How do we figure out what's wrong? Many times it's a process, it's a history. Too often this is how we do things. I think that when anyone new comes into the picture, it's a challenge. But if you can improve and break through that terrible relationship issue in the company, just think about how much more effective and efficient the company you talked about, where the inside versus the outside is at war. I mean, how much better would it be if they got along? I mean, I'm not talking about kumbaya and rainbows and unicorns. Certainly that's a goal every day. But, how much better would it be if they had some idea that, the reason Diane is difficult, she's caring for an aging parent and she's got grandchildren that need help and she's got this and she's got that. Well, that makes us more empathetic, right? Now we have a glimpse into Diane's life. Oh, and Daryl, the sales guy, he's getting a divorce and, he's having a hard time. He's living in a terrible place right now and he's missing his kids. And, oh, well, that makes us feel differently about Daryl, So all of a sudden we're working through this and we're understanding people a little bit better. And look, at all of a sudden our process is more efficient and more effective. And you know what? At the end of the day, the revenue is going to be higher because what was the example you gave that you can't ride the horse going the wrong direction? Well,
it's easier to ride the horse in the direction it's going.
Okay. So what if people stopped fighting that? Because that's what's happening in a toxic work environment. People are fighting they're trying to go upstream, right? So what if we were all rowing in the same direction? Doesn't the boat move faster?
Yeah. It's also useful. And again, I mention my coach a lot because she's so brilliant. Not only did she teach me that you can only fix the person in the mirror, but the other thing, and it took me a while to really get this one deeply, is that everyone is doing the best they can. And, look, we're judgment machines. And I've worked hard over the years to be less judgmental, but we all judge everybody every minute of every day. And when she told me that, we happen to share a client, my coach and I, and there was one particular person, I'm not going to even say the name, but let's say it was Susan. I said, there's no way Susan is doing the best she can every day. I watch her. She sucks. When I shifted my thought, to Susan really is doing the best she can. It may not be enough for me. It may not be what I want Susan to do. She may not be acting in the way I'd like, but she's doing the best I can. Simply the acceptance that she's doing the best she, or the realization that she's doing the best she can, shifted me. And there's what's called the observer effect, that things shift just by the fact that you're observing them. I think that's an important concept too, realizing that everybody is a human. Everybody has struggles. I don't care how wealthy you are, how good looking you are. I'm guessing that Hollywood actors and actors. Oh, that's not even a good example. They're nuts. But we're all struggling, to get through the day. Some better than others, but everybody is trying to do the best they can.
Yeah. Jeff, I recently read this book, and it's not a new book, and it's a really short book. And again, I have no interest in it. And I think I've sold at least 10 in the last week on Amazon. It's called The 4 Agreements.
Sure, of course.
Okay. So certainly, if you're in the relationship business, I think you need to read The 4 Agreements. For me, it was relatively life-changing because of the 4 agreements, so it's your word is impeccable, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, and give 100%, give your best, right? So give your best all the time. I felt like, well, I was nailing 1 and 4, but 2 and 3, really bad. I am very guilty of taking things personally and making crazy, wild assumptions. So this book,
That's the one I struggle with, Lynn. Don't take things personally. Be impeccable with your word. That one I got. But
yes.
Man, don't take things personally. Wow. That's a tough one. I'm still struggling with that one.
So I feel like my husband has been living by these 4 things his whole life, but he never articulated them. I was really angry at him about that because this guy has obviously done very well for himself. And here my husband always tells me, don't take things personally, but he never wrote it down in ancient Toltec wisdom. So, thanks for that. But anyway, this book, I wake up in the morning and I think, whoop, don't take things personally. Like it's like a new mantra for me because I need to realize and recognize, people are living their own challenges and they're probably not thinking about me as much as I think they are. So
yeah, everybody's got their stuff. There's a fantastic video. I have a copy of it somewhere and it's kind of blurry, but it's I forgot the title of it, but it's this guy leaves his house in the morning and he goes to get coffee. And some guy online gives him a hard time and somebody bumps him walking. A whole bunch of stuff happens to him and he's like, and you watch and you go, yeah, these people are real assholes. Pardon my French, everybody. But then these magic glasses get delivered to him. And when he puts them on, he can now see the people and there's a thought bubble over their heads that shows what they're going through. So the guy was hassling him, his wife's divorcing him. Some woman who gave him a hard time, her husband just left her and she's homeless. And, when we start to realize that everyone has their shit,
yes.
It makes it a little bit easier to be empathetic and to read the room and to act with people in a way that might get you a better result than if you don't.
Correct.
Well, you are delicious. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to share my screen right now. If people want to get in touch with you for some reason, can you please tell them the best way to do that?
Yes, please follow me on Instagram at Lynn Catalano Speaks. Certainly, I'm on LinkedIn, and that's Lynn Catalano, and I'm on Facebook at Read the Room, and I have a website, www.lynncatalano.com, CATALANO. So.
Okay, and is there a phone number you want to give out in case people want to reach you or no?
Sure. 716-622-6660.
Perfect. Any last thoughts?
Thank you so much. I have enjoyed this so much, Jeff. And I wish you well this weekend. And I hope you have a wonderful 4th quarter.
I hope everybody does. Absolutely. You have to make that happen. Thank you so much for your time and generously sharing your brilliance with us. I really appreciate it. And I'll end this as I do all of these. Oh, Tony Scalise, didn't know you were here, but good to see you, my friend. He says, thank you to you both. Steve Kent says, thank you, Jeff Goldberg, and Lynn Catalano Speaks. As I always end these, please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Have a great weekend, Lynn. Have a great weekend, everybody. And one of these days, I'm going to get up to Niagara Falls and see it, and I'm going to visit you.
Please. Come.
Bye, everyone.